and welcome to a special episode of the HLTB podcast. I am Paula, accompanied by Josh.
What's up, everybody?
And today we have a very special episode in the sense that this is a New Game Plus, as you see on the title on screen.
Mm-hmm.
So here we will just tackle a topic to its full potential, hopefully. And there isn't like anything of the regular agenda. So for the topic of today, we have things we've learned from playing video games, which is a rather curious topic because I'm pretty sure your parents told you, hey, stop playing video games because they're rotting your brain or something, or go play outside.
Exactly.
Today we're here to kind of like undo all those myths, like debunk those myths that you can't learn anything from playing video games. So first of all, where the idea came from.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is a topic that I propose mainly because I feel like video games have improved my life in a way a little bit for the better. More on that later because I have a little story that will tie in with the topic. And that got me thinking, hey, I literally couldn't have done this if I haven't had like the chance to kind of like mentally practice this in a way.
Yeah.
So yeah, the first, I'm going to jump really quick with the first one because it is rather short and then I'm going to pass it on to Josh. So for me, it has been other language, mainly English, because, well, I am Spanish speaking since I live in Chile. And I'm going to say my English used to suck, like badly. And since most of the games that I wanted to play, I either only was able to got ROMs from sites that were in English at the time that I started playing ROMs. And even like some games aren't available in Spanish at all.
Which is weird anyway.
Like, yeah, like you think that maybe like some companies will go with the Spanish localization sometimes, like as an extra to the English or Japanese. If the game is Japanese, maybe Spanish and English, something like that. Because there's so many people that speak Spanish around the world. But there's also the thing that a lot of the countries that speak Spanish in Latin America, we have to pay more for games and we get paid less for work, like for in an hourly range.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of makes sense, I guess. But yeah, playing games has got me a long way into like learning English in general. Sometimes I just want to goof around and try to read the dialogues as I were the character that was talking. So that really helped me a lot on improving my English, like both reading and spoken English. Fun fact, when I first was a guest, in season 1 of the podcast, I felt like my English was so fucking rusty. And from that point on, I made it a point to practice every day by playing things like Ace Attorney and doing the voices of the characters.
Awesome.
I think that worked.
Well, yeah.
I hope.
I mean, your English is great.
I am here now because of that. Yeah, I'm here that because of that one decision. I'm here being the host of the podcast now. And now I'm starting to learn Japanese. So it's a little bit more tricky because I feel like there's a lot more like adornments on like things that aren't like usually said like in games that, I mean, in real life that are in games because they try to give them like a more out there personality to the different characters. So that has been a challenge, but at the very least, it serves me to learn to read Japanese.
Yeah.
So Josh, take it away. Or like, do you have anything to add to this point before we move forward?
I always say to anyone who can speak English as a second language that, and you know, I can understand you, that you're obviously doing well because you're way better than my Spanish because I know maybe 3 words and that's about it. I would not be able to get by in another language. I'm stuck to English. So I'm very grateful to anyone who learns English because then I can communicate with other people and not have to rely on my own stupid brain. But yeah, the first thing I think of when I think of learning things from games is kind of how when things come up in daily life that I go, oh, I learned that from playing a video game. And one of the things that, funnily enough, has come up a lot for me is real locations that get built in games and kind of are faithfully represented and as realistic as possible. Like, of course, nothing's 100% realistic, but quite often you can get pretty close. And it's one of the reasons I love the Assassin's Creed series, because that series obviously takes place in lots of different locations around the world in lots of famous cities, and those cities are very well reproduced in game. And the main reason I know that is because I also like watching travel shows and things like that. And when people go to these cities, I recognize landmarks and different areas because I've been there in an Assassin's Creed game. And there are other games who do this as well, but I thought I'd just kind of focus on Assassin's Creed because that's like the most obvious to me. And I'm going to go through a few of the titles in the series just to kind of explain what I mean more specifically. And the first one, of course, I think of is Assassin's Creed 2, which takes place in the Tuscany region of Italy. And the two main cities in that are Florence and Venice. And again, I'm not sure if they're 100% accurate as far as actual representations of those cities, but they do collect noticeable landmarks and areas and very much the cultural style and architecture of the city as well. So when I've seen them on television and that kind of thing, I go, oh, that's Venice, and that looks very much like that kind of part of the city, or that looks like the vineyards around Florence, or stuff like that, because I went there in Assassin's Creed. Similarly, the Assassin's Creed 3, which takes part in the American frontier and mostly around Boston and New York, and even though they're much, much older versions of those cities and much smaller as well, there are certain parts in that which are recognizable as well, much like Assassin's Creed 4, Black Flag, which takes place in the West Indies, so through the Caribbean and that sort of area. There are, again, I don't know if there's too many places that are one-to-one reproductions, but they very much capture the culture and the architecture of each area. So I've seen stuff on TV where they haven't told me the location. I go, oh, that looks like the Bahamas or something like that. and it'll be because I've played it in a game and I've sailed my ship there in Assassin's Creed kind of thing. The cool thing is the newer games where they actually get way more accurate are the games from like Assassin's Creed Unity and onwards. So Unity and Syndicate are the most recent ones before the recent ones when they changed everything. And Unity obviously was set in France, so you spend most of your time in Paris. And there are definitely areas of Paris that they did reproduce very faithfully and very accurately, because I've recognized photos like one-to-one and gone, I know that from the game, and that's in that kind of southern part of Paris near the Eiffel Tower, and or whatever. And same with the Assassin's Creed Syndicate, which is obviously set in London, in England, and it's very much right around the kind of turn of the century industrialization era. And there are certain parts, and in particular, I always remember in the game I think they're called boroughs in London, like suburbs, and Westminster in particular, which is where the Royal Palace is, and Westminster Gardens, which are these beautiful lawns and trees and stuff and really nice upmarket areas. That stuff hasn't changed for a very long time. So in the game, they're actually quite the same as they are today. So I've run all over Buckingham Palace and been inside and outside and, had a great old time, but in a video game. So, and that's actually somewhere where I've been in real life as well, which is kind of fun because I've stood at the gates of Buckingham Palace and seen it with my own eyes, and then playing it in the game, I can kind of go, hey, this looks familiar. I kind of know what this is like. And yeah, that kind of stuff it's not necessarily, like I say, it's not always 100% accurate. It's not always something that I would use as, oh, I'm educated on different cities around the world. It's more from playing these games and from spending time in these cities and different landmarks and stuff. It kind of opens your eyes a bit to the rest of the world and how these locations do differ and what has changed and that kind of thing, or what kind of classic buildings and stuff are still in existence. Like I think there's a in Assassin's Creed 2, I think there's an Italian basilica, which is like a big church that you spend a lot of time in. It's almost like its own little dungeon. And I remember watching something where they were talking about art or something like that in real life, and I was watching it going, man, that place looks really familiar. And I was scratching my brain trying to figure out why I recognized it and was familiar with it. And it was just the fact that I'd played it in Assassin's Creed and it had been such a good representation that I literally felt like I'd been there, even though I obviously haven't.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I find that really interesting because people will talk about things in conversation and I'll know an answer, like I'll know the name of some landmark or something like that because I've experienced it in a video game, and no other way would I have ever come in contact with it. And so yeah, that's where I think like real world locations and things that you can visit is kind of a very tangible and understandable thing that you can learn from games. Like you get a better appreciation of the world. They're almost like their own little encyclopedias where if enough effort has been put into like create a realistic setting that exists, then you can really get to know it quite well. And yeah, the other, just to round this off, the the other quick example I had of that was racing games, and I'm sure lots of sports games are like this as well. But I love playing racing games as much as I'm not very good at them, and I love very realistic racing games too. So I like playing realistic tracks and that kind of thing. And there are only a certain number of realistic race tracks in the world. So when you start playing enough racing games, you see them repeated and reproduced again and again in each game. So like I know what Silverstone is like as a racetrack, which is one of the famous ones. I think it's in England. I know what the Dubai Autodrome is like. I know what the Fuji International Speedway is. And I'm not a racing fan, like sports fan or anything. I just play the video games. And yeah, even though I've never probably watched a race there in real life, I've raced it in quotes in a game. So all these kind of real life locations really, they sit in your memory, and then you see it in real life, and you kind of get to connect the two and go, oh, I'm already familiar with this. It's not brand new. I actually have some idea about what I'm looking at.
Actually, was it like the latest Forza Horizons, the one based in Mexico, or am I?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Forza Horizon 5 is Mexico based, yeah.
I feel like they did a great job like reproducing like some specific areas of the city or a city or cities. I haven't played the game, so I can't really say if there's more than one city on it.
Yeah.
But I hear like very happy comments about it in some of my circles.
Nice.
In general, since I play a lot of Japanese games, I see a lot of Japanese places.
Yeah.
Both from long ago and some from current day Japan. It's kind of cool because when I was talking with a friend, she went to Japan. We could actually like talk, hey, so you visited Akihabara, and I already have like an idea what that place in Tokyo was about, or like, oh, then you went to Shinjuku, and then there's like a game that is solely based on Shinjuku, and even though it is a visual novel, so I have like snippets of the city in a way. It was fun because like there was one crossing, like street crossing in Shinjuku, that the game Color Maladies like they took a photo of it and introduced it into the game like as is. So
cool.
I've seen some people on Twitter are actually going to Japan and taking a picture of that spot in particular because it was in the game, and you can see like plazas and stuff like that from the city, like from Shinjuku in the game, which I find kind of cool. And the other one that is cool is like not only like one-to-one places in video games from the real world, but inspired places or inspired structures from the real world in video games. One that I remember is okay, so it's called that I'm reading it out right now in Central Japan homepage, like Tajima City Culture Museum. That is kind of like a specific kind of like it is now a museum, but it used to be like a specific kind of house or structure where people would grow silkworms like on the upper part of the house. And that structure in particular was used in a game called Olympia Sore. And there was like one district like that pretty much like wove their own like silk and clothes, and they grew the worms, and the architecture in that place is exactly like the one I'm seeing here right now in the homepage. Like, and that is like the coolest thing ever, because when you see a world that is built like with intention in a way, you see those little details, and someone in the fandom will jump and say, hey, this is a thing in real life, and you learn a little bit more about real life because that little snippet that you saw in a video game.
Yeah. Well, and I like speaking of Japanese as well. I remember playing Ghostwire Tokyo, which is set in Shibuya district, and it's quite I believe it's a pretty good representation or reproduction of that district of Tokyo. But I was also watching something just earlier today before recording this, and it was a video on there's a horror game. I don't know if it's new or not, but it's based on the Kowloon city, I think, which is in China, and it's like a walled city that is super run down and ghetto and really cheap, and just people living on top of each other and really dense and that kind of thing. And so this game used it as the setting for like a horror game. So you go into Kowloon and yeah, obviously it gets scary and stuff, but all the narrow alleyways and streets and everything, you get a really good feeling for what the city might actually be like to visit or to live in, which yeah, is really cool, I think.
Jumping like a little bit from that point, like we have also like historical settings, like the ones you name on Assassin's Creed, like 1 and 2 usually like take settings from many years ago and bring them to the modern era via video games. And one such example that I have from it is, well, mainly Japanese history, because I played Hakuoki, and I'm pulling up like Wikipedia right now because I am very bad with dates. But they kind of like took that era where you still have samurai, but they were like slowly beginning kind of like to industrialize, but not quite yet, because they were kind of like iffy about the idea. And they were like very fond of foreigners like at that point. But you have like the Shinsengumi, which were kind of like can I say an army in a way? Let me pull up the Wikipedia page real quick because I don't want to fuck this up. Yeah, it's more like a special police force from the Shogunate in Japan.
Right.
And the thing about them is that during their the specific era, like people didn't really like the Shogunate anymore. So there's this alliance that is called the Sacho Alliance between the Satsuma and Shoshu. And they're like kind of like in contact with I'm gonna say the outside world to make it like more mystic. But they actually started getting weaponry from overseas, and that is one of the things that really playing against the Shinsengumi because they were samurai, and when they started like getting the new shiny weapons and stuff, it was kind of like too late. Like their fate was already written, but they did try to survive in a way. And that part of history is actually very visited in Japanese games. Like the one example that I have right now is Hakuoki, Edo Blossoms, and Hakuoki Ghetto Winds. And but I've heard from the otome community in general that it was like an overdone topic, like the Shinsengumi in general.
Right.
So when Winter Wish came out and it was like, hey, this is that era, but without the Shinsengumi, let's eat this up like cookies. I don't know. But still, I went and investigated a lot about this era because I found it like very interesting because in the game, it is different to other otome games because it is like a 6, 7, maybe 10 years time the timeline, I guess. I think it was like 6 or 8, but don't quote me on that. I'm bad with dates. But you can see the different events that were like kind of like important for the Shinsengumi in particular at the time. And thanks to that, I got that like itch to investigate even more. And there's some really fun parts like fun details. Like they have these I'm gonna call them emblems because calling them shields is like kind of weird. But each clan or family, the ones with money anyway, have like emblems or like shields that then are used in the characters' clothing when they go like for a for a more Western getup.
Yep.
They have like these adornments like from the shields, like shields emblems, however you are supposed to call them in English because I don't know. And you have even like I guess like the second to last commander in the Shinsengumi, because I think they changed it like after he died. It was Hichikata Toshizo, and he was the second in command from the Shinsengumi for a while. And I was like, hey, how accurate is his representation of the game in the game? And it is kind of fun how he kind of has like this stern look that he not as much like he has in the game, but they kind of like capture that stern look that he has on the photo that is on Wikipedia anyway. They go over the top with it because it is a game, but anyway. And it seems like he was called like the demon commander. Like he has like a very bad rep as a commander because how ruthless he was in history. And then they took it like one step further into the game and actually make him like a half demon in the later part of the game because he has to drink a thing called the Ochimizu. But that is another thing altogether. But sorry, I'm rambling, but seeing like how creative they can get with some of these personalities. And that was one thing that I see in Japanese history, like in Japan, that I don't see like anywhere else. They take their historical fiction figures and put it in games, and sometimes in day games. I'm like, what the hell? It's like if you could date like Manuel Rodriguez or Bernardo Higgins and stuff like that, and it is like when you think it like that, it is playing weird. But only in Japan, I guess.
Well, it makes me think actually of just some mythology in general. Like, I know China loves to talk about the era of the Four Kingdoms or Three Kingdoms, depending on which era you're looking at.
Freaking, yeah.
And like the Dynasty Warriors games are all about that kind of era, and as much as they're not realistic because they're all, these historical heroes who are larger than life and are basically their stories have become completely fictitious and not realistic at all. But they are real stories from their history and they are real mythologies that they're referring to.
Yeah.
So it is real in a way. Like if you were learning the history of China, you'd learn a lot about stuff that's in Dynasty Warriors games or similar games like that. And I find all that stuff really interesting anyway. Like I love a bit of mythology and lore and that kind of thing. And I think it also goes into, say, even games like God of War, which
True.
originally deals with like Greek mythology and it's talking about gods and all that kind of stuff. So your mileage may vary on the realism of a God of War game. Um, but I always find those stories really fascinating, and I think they're great stories. And they were made back in the day to kind of teach morals and all this kind of stuff. And I love seeing them explored in a video game kind of setting because you get to actually take part in those stories, and rather than just read about them, you get to kind of be involved in them, which I think is obviously the upside of playing a video game as opposed to like reading a Wikipedia page or something.
Yeah. Which like that part of being involved is like so much fun in a way.
Yeah.
Even if you know it isn't like 100% real, the fact that it is kind of like a thing and you get to be a part of it is kind of fun.
Well, it made me think about as well the not to just make this all about Assassin's Creed, but
Mm,
the newer Assassin's Creed games, which are Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla,
mhm.
they all deal with mythology quite heavily. But the locations and stuff, I think, are actually quite accurate, and some of the most accurate in the whole series. Because I know in the first one, which is Origins, which is set in Egypt, they actually have a version of the game that is like an educational version of the game, where you don't actually play the game, but you can kind of explore the map and you get to see the pyramids close up and explore them as a person would back in the day. And it's actually, I think it's been very well praised for its accuracy and for being able to be used as an actual educational tool rather than just a video game, because they put so much effort into the accuracy and the um, authenticity of it. So yeah.
Mm. And now that that you mention it, I do remember them like heavily advertising that part of the game. And
Yeah.
another game that kind of does that, but not with places, but I guess war machines and the specific points in history was Age of Empires 4 because you have two versions of the game, the one with some with a collection of videos and the one without it.
Hmm.
And this collection of videos was made to, I guess, hey, you like this game and you like the things that happen and maybe the cool machinery, let's teach you about it. So I remember they showed a video about how the trebuchet works. And I actually recognized the person doing the explanation because she actually worked on not SciShow, but Crash
Hmm.
Course History. No, Crash Course Physics. Yeah, because they were talking about the physics of the trebuchet.
Yeah.
And that was like one little fun little thing that they did. I haven't watched all the videos, but they're like quite fun to watch and very educative.
Yeah. Well, and from what I know, I think Age of Empires is quite accurate. Well, and to that, I mean, we could go on and on about all the games that are accurate and, uh, you can learn from, like even stuff like Civilization or um, the Total War games, that kind of stuff. Like they're all based on, even if they're not, 100% accurate, as in like, a Civilization game can play out and you can have Gandhi causing,
Obliterating everything.
yeah, like blasting nukes on everybody and stuff. So, but I think the concept of how societies grow and how nations expand and what's involved in that and how you have to support citizens and use diplomacy and all these sorts of things. I think they're all things that you can learn from playing these games that perhaps you don't learn otherwise. Similarly, like this leads on again to something else that I was thinking of, which is kind of learning about other lifestyles and kind of vocations, like jobs that other people do. Because in the last episode I mentioned I was playing Power Wash Simulator,
Yeah.
which, I'm not going to bring up here, but there are part of the reason why I like simulator games in general, like good ones, is that you get to kind of get a feel for what's involved in something that you don't otherwise take part in. So, like the farming simulator games, there is a lot wrong with them. Indeed, like the physics are weird. Some of the systems are just completely arbitrary. But at the end of the day, I've learned more about that style of agriculture from playing those games because the elements they have and the parts that they're simulating well do teach you something. Like the process of plowing and fertilizing a field and then growing crops and harvesting them and selling them and looking after animals and making sure you've got enough feed for your animals and how to effectively breed them and or use milk cows, all this kind of stuff, like anything like that, where of course it's very much a video game and it's nowhere near real life, and I'd never claimed to be a farmer having played Farming Simulator. But I feel like I have more an appreciation of what that role entails than I did before I played the game, kind of thing. Similarly with like Euro Truck Simulator and stuff, I kind of have more an appreciation of what it's like to drive a big truck on a road than before because I've never done it for real.
And also more appreciation for what is to park a real life truck.
Exactly.
Because holy crap, the physics for a truck are very different from those for a car.
Well, and it's that I was thinking as well, it's that thing of being able to take risks that have no consequence as well. Like in a video game, if I've rolled semi-trailers in Euro Truck Simulator because I've taken corners too quickly or I've just smashed right into other cars or something like that because I haven't been paying attention. Because you can take those risks in a video game, but not if you're in real life. And I do think that playing lots and lots of racing games has like made me a better driver just in general because I've been able to take risks that I would never take in real life. And I understand, kind of when you're pushing the limits of the car in a racing game and you're on the edge of like losing control, you push it a little bit further just to see where that line is and you're going to crash and everything, but you can probably just rewind it anyway and try again. Whereas in real life, I'm never going to push it that much. But from having done it in video games, I can kind of recognize in real life if I'm starting to lose a bit of control, like nice and early, because I've actually experienced it a little bit through a video game. So,
like on that note of like practice or like being on a safe space to experiment a little bit, that also goes for maybe human relations in a way, or like
absolutely.
reading through and stuff like that. So fun fact, I was actually born with very low charisma in a way. Partially because my ADHD and partially because I'm more of I like books more than I like people in a way. Let's keep it like that. And so I'm the kind of girl that kind of got bullied and like went back into her little shell and never like really interacted with a lot of people. So I have like growing up in school, I had like very few friends, and so I had like very little chance, not very many chances to interact and in a safe space. So things like role playing or like playing games that lets you role play in a way, and seeing like the different reactions of the NPCs to the stuff I do or the stuff I say, kind of like lets you a little bit to, hey, maybe this isn't the best thing to say in this situation. Like maybe if this person is panicking, maybe it is better like to validate their things rather than to crash them or something like that. And I know that for a lot of people that is common sense.
Yeah.
Again, I wasn't born with a lot of common sense. I still don't have a lot of common sense, so I have to rely on what I learn.
Mhm.
And that goes for a lot of people too. Like for a lot of people, it isn't obvious when to say something or when to not say something or when to overshare and when not to overshare. Maybe I'm oversharing right now and I don't know it. But the point is
That's great.
that, yep. The point is that I actually got into a situation where um, I teach martial arts as a kind of like side job, mainly Taiti. And we had one
Cool.
student like kind of like at the edge of a panic attack. And for some reason, I was the one talking to her. Don't ask me, don't ask questions. But I was able to navigate a very delicate situation because I had the kind of like the practice beforehand of, hey, maybe it is common sense to just say this or maybe not. And I'm not gonna say that I cure all her problems, but at the very least, she didn't go in full panic attack, and
Mm.
she was able to like return to the class for a little bit after that, and she seemed better. Like I
Yeah,
didn't
that's
fuck up.
awesome.
I didn't rush her into something um that would hurt her like further. So
Mm.
in that way, like a lot of character-driven games, a lot of visual novels and otome games and stuff like that, but I also like RPGs where you have interactions with your party, kind of like let you know when you fucked up, like in a very visible way. So in that way, I kind of like accumulated a little bit of experience there. Um, and that made me feel safe enough like to at the very least be able to normally talk with someone and not feeling that I'm walking on eggshells, which is kind of personal, and it is kind of silly because Paula here, these are pixels. Real people are more complex than pixels, but sometimes the pixels are kind of complex too in the backstories. And
Yeah.
it gives you like a hint on how someone could be feeling at a certain moment in time, and being able to kind of like empathize with that makes you overall a better person. Like you're able to put yourself in someone else's shoes, and I think that's the part that you're able to explore more in fiction than in real life, especially in video games because they put you literally in someone else's shoes,
Mm.
and you may realize, hey, I didn't choose to be in this situation because you didn't. You're the main. You were just um, thrown into this situation as a video game character, and then you realize, hey, maybe that person has a point. Sorry, that
Uh,
got a little bit too profound for me.
no, that's great, and I couldn't agree more. I have a thing where I think that most conflict in the world comes from just straight up misunderstanding
Yeah.
and or fear of the unknown,
Mhm.
like not knowing what someone else is experiencing, and so that might scare someone, and you might get defensive and react badly about that, or the other way around, or whatever. And there was one game I was thinking of, and I just looked it up. I don't know if anyone else has played Tell Me Why, which was, I think it was kind of, I think it's from the same mob who did the Life is Strange series.
I
Uh,
think you're right. And I remember Alex
yeah, it
talking
is.
about the game too.
Yeah, and that game is no spoiler or anything here, because the game is actually not about this at all. But one of the characters is a trans character who is a trans man and has a twin who is their sister. And the game focuses around these two characters. And I really liked it because, I I'm not going to pretend like I know everything about what it's like to be trans, because I don't, because I'm not. As supportive as I believe I am, I don't know what that's like, and I probably never will, because it's not something that is part of my life. But even just from playing this game, I thought they treated the subject really well, and really sensitively and honestly as well, to the point that from playing the game, I felt like I had a better understanding in a little way. Obviously, it's a very complex thing to understand, but I felt like I had more empathy and understanding for someone who might have transitioned in their life, that I might meet some other time. And there's a whole lot of examples of that I could think of, of different types of lifestyles, or even down to just genders, like playing as a female character and what that's like, as opposed to living my life as a man. Like, I don't know what it's like to be female, so playing as a female character can sometimes give me more insight into what that's like, if it's a game that, leans on that sort of stuff, or is trying to tell those sorts of stories.
Yeah, because a lot of the time when you're playing a female character, that just means you have a bigger wardrobe and a lot of more options for customizing your character. There are games that
Yeah.
do lean into that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and obviously, not all games are equal. Like, there are some really badly written games, which I wouldn't recommend anyone learn anything from. But occasionally there are games that tell really good stories that explore these sorts of themes, and I think are really good to experience, just like in any media, like books or movies or anything like that. But playing, like you say, playing actually in the shoes of a character that you don't understand intrinsically, or you don't immediately relate to, can be a really great experience to help you understand where they're coming from a lot more, and what it might be like to be in their shoes. Which, of course, none of us will ever know what it's like to be in anyone else's shoes, but we can at least start to build that empathy and understanding, and kind of have an appreciation for why, or for why someone might think a certain way, or where they're coming from, or anything like that. And I think that's really valuable.
Yeah, and that goes with not only like emotions, but also like either political standpoint, something like that. Um, my example for this pick would be Vastafelds, because you get to see different phases of what it means to be an immigrant and an illegal one at that. Like, some do pass borders, maybe with not the best of intentions, but a lot of those either get tricked or into the situation they're at. Like, hey, you're gonna live such a better life, and it is just a scam to try to get them like out of their money, and then they are left all alone in a country they don't know and without any context. Like, um, I'm not one to condone, or like I'm not in favor of illegal immigration. I feel like it is very bad, both for the person themselves, because since they are not registered in any way, shape, or form, they don't have basic human rights in their country they're stepping the foot
Yeah,
on.
totally.
And sometimes it can also lead to problems for the people that already live on that country. But I can empathize with the things they go through. And even like just regular immigrants, like they have it rough because of they have a bad rep in some countries. Like, people in general don't like what's different, so they don't give them the same opportunities. Some manage to build their niche, their work, as some others are marginalized in a way because just not being born in a certain country, and that's horrible. And so yeah, that's Bastafellows really explored the illegal immigrant part in a way that I didn't even know it was a thing. And when I realized it was a thing, it kind of like opened my eyes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think I mentioned maybe a couple of episodes ago or something, I played a game called Venba, which was about an
Yeah.
Indian family who had emigrated to North America. Um, and that one, I found that story amazing because it was just, I've heard similar stories before, but it's nice to hear another one from another perspective because it's slightly different every time of, yeah, the struggles that they went through as a family being Indian in a new country and what that meant for not only them dealing with perhaps racism or those sorts of things that happen in society, but also the fact that they're raising their young child in a Western culture.
Yeah.
So their child becomes way more Western than they ever were because they're still very much uh, living their Indian culture. Um, so part of the story, and not spoiling anything because it's just a theme of the story anyway, is that how that affects them as a family because they're trying to relate to their child who's now growing up as a Westerner and a foreigner, basically, to what they know. And I'd never really thought about that before. Like, that's something to consider if you immigrate somewhere. Like, your children and your young children will grow up in a different culture and have all that influence that you don't have. And so you're going to have different lifestyles anyway, just within your own family.
Mm-hmm.
And I figure that must be, you know, wonderful in so many ways, but also very challenging and even a bit sad in other ways. So yeah.
That's a very good example, actually. Like, now that I think about it, I have family that has lived like that. Because my cousin married someone from North America, and their children are North American. They haven't lived in Chile at
Yeah.
all. That is one thing that I
Yeah.
didn't think about.
Well, and it doesn't have to be all bad either. Like, I'm sure it's probably fine.
Yeah, they are fine, but it's still kind of curious, like how they had to adapt. Like, one particular thing is that my cousin, it wasn't like really religious, or he was a believer, but maybe not only, but he had to adopt like this very religious mindset because of his wife, and their
Yeah.
children are very religious because of that, because they're the kind to go to church all every Sunday and stuff.
Yeah, right. Well, similarly, I worked for an Iranian guy when I was younger, who just doing IT stuff like computer stuff, and he was and his family were refugees from Iran in Australia,
Yeah.
and so he was obviously very much involved with the Iranian community, which I'd never even knew existed really, as you know, white boy living in Australia.
Hmm.
I knew it existed obviously, but I've never interacted with because just you don't come across certain groups in your day to day. But it was awesome to work for him because not only did I get to talk to him a lot and hear all the stories about, you know, why he left Iran and what his family are doing here and all this sort of stuff, but I got to meet the wider community of Iranian refugees who, you know, are just like everyone else, funnily enough, just happy people trying to live their lives. But they had so much culture behind them that they brought with them that was different to my own. It was really an educational and interesting experience because they'd have big events and stuff and I'd get invited and, you know, they'd have great Iranian food and music and all this stuff that otherwise I never would have interacted with. And I just loved it because it's, you know, give me as much as I can, I'll take it all. Because I just love all that stuff, like all the tasty foods you can eat around the world and all the cool different music and stuff. Oh, it's just the best. But that I thought about him as well because it being Iran when I was playing a game called Revolution 1979, which is literally a game that's made to teach you about the Iranian Revolution that happened in 1979. And this wasn't why this other fellow I was talking about, this wasn't why he was here. This is more recent stuff of why he was in Australia. But in Revolution 1979, the game, it's very much like a Telltale kind of game. Like you walk around as a third person perspective in a space and kind of point and click on things. and you play the role of a young man who is a photographer during riots and protests and all the stuff that was happening during that time. So you're on the streets and there's crowds full of people, and it's quite dangerous because there's also army officials and things who are trying to arrest people, and there are protesters who are rioting and looting and this sort of stuff as well. So it's a very dangerous and angsty kind of situation. But as a game, I learned so much because the people who made it obviously wanted it to be educational as well as being a game, because it's very much still a game. Like, it's not like you're just going to a class and learning about the revolution. But what they did put in was basically a whole lot of extra stuff that if you wanted to read it and learn about it, you could. So you might be walking down the street and you walk up to a vendor and buy some bread or something. And when you do that, there's an option then to read about Iranian street vendors and bread and, you know, traditional foods and that kind of stuff, which of course I did because it's interesting. But it's a nice little addition to have as you're kind of walking around playing the game, which plays very much like a Telltale game like Walking Dead or something like that, where you have to make decisions and that changes how the story goes and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, as an educational tool and as something, like, I didn't know anything about that particular event before playing the game. I kind of knew that something had happened once, but no real details, and or what it was like for the people who actually lived there. Whereas I feel like, as much as, again, it's a video game, so you gotta know it's not 100% accurate, but I feel like I've got more of an appreciation of what it might have been like to kind of be there in that place and in that time, which, you know, is fascinating, and I think just gives us all a better understanding of how different life can be, and, you know, not necessarily how scary other people can be, but just how similar we are as well.
Definitely. You touched on the topic of food, so I'm gonna put my 2 grains of salt in there. Sorry.
Yeah.
That was terrible, even by my standards. So I'm gonna spice things up with a little bit of food from other games. That I think one of the things that really talk about how people live is what people eat. And in general,
Yeah.
I've had the luck to just travel around the world with my parents, at least until a certain age, and try different foods in each place that I've been. And it really talks about the people in there, the different flavors they use, the spices that they use, the food that is available, and the things that they don't eat too. So one of the things that I always keep my eye out for is food in video games, because that's a thing that I like to make. I mean, cooking first with the aid of my parents, like helping my father, really. Since I was very, very young, I might have been 5, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And he always liked to cook everything and anything that comes from other sides of the sides from the world. So now I keep my eye out for stuff. Since, again, I play a lot of Japanese games. If you have like any non-Japanese games that had either recipes or like names of food that you'd like me to try, I'm happy to like. But for example, Persona 4, I saw a lot of Japanese curry, especially because of a scene in a camping scene. And one day that I was just browsing around in my local Asian food market, I saw like blocks of spice for Japanese curry. So I tried it out and it is delicious.
Nice.
I got curious about omurice because it is something that you can make with the leftovers from rice and some kind of protein from the day before. You just shove it into
Yep.
a frying pan, maybe put a little bit of ketchup or other things, and then make the like kind of like an omelette, but not quite, but a very thin layer of egg.
Mm-hmm.
And before it cooks, you grab the other ingredients on the egg and decorate it with ketchup, and it is delicious too. And don't get me started on miso soup. I love that. Like, again, I'm lucky enough to have places to buy the spices and some of the ingredients for my dishes, mainly because I live in the capital, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to. But it's so fun to just try something out for yourself, and even like just making it yourself instead of going somewhere to eat it. Like, part of the fun is making it. Like, I don't know. I love that so much.
And I think it's easier than people think as well.
Yeah, like
it can be quite intimidating to think, oh, you've got to cook something weird and different, but people do it every day. It's not that hard.
Yeah, and it's just swapping the ingredients you're using sometimes, or adding some extra spice to the dish, or slightly changing like the cooking times, and or like stirring it another way. I don't know. That there's such finesse in the art of cooking that makes the dish come out like a very different way. I either try the final boss of cookies, macarons. They're very hard to make.
Nice.
I had to make my own almond flour because they didn't sell it here. So I have to grind almonds for that.
Oh, nice.
So it's quite expensive because almonds are expensive. And they are very, very difficult to get right. But that is one example of things that are difficult, but most of the dishes aren't.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's where a lot of like learning about different cultures and things in games and in media in general, really, but especially trying things in video games, I think, which can often go into more depth than perhaps like a movie or a book could. Because like I say, for this Iranian Revolution game, like the options are there to spend hours just reading about the history and the culture and that kind of thing. You don't have to engage with that if you don't want to, if you just want to play the game, but you can. And so you learn about, different foods and different ways of just living and eating and sharing and interacting as a community. And I think that is something that video games can offer more than other media types. Like with different foods and stuff, like, again, thinking about, just because I thought about it before, but playing Ghostwire Tokyo, even though that game is completely fictional and you're basically fighting evil spirits and things, there are shops all around the map where you can go and just buy food and stuff. Like to get your health back, you just buy regular snacks and things that you would buy in Japan. So there's been a number of those and they're beautifully illustrated, obviously, in the game and all that kind of stuff. So you get a nice little picture of this thing and you go, oh, that looks tasty. I wonder what that is. So you go and Google it and you're like, I'm going to make that later. And yeah, even if the game doesn't explicitly tell you how to do it, it kind of exposes you to it and says, hey, this exists. And you think, oh, yeah, how about that? I'm going to try that out.
You think, I didn't know I needed this in my life.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that that sort of exposure to things and learning about becoming more informed about the world and the differences that exist, as much as, we are all just humans doing our thing. But that's where I find culture so fascinating, because we all develop different ways of doing things, different foods, and even, like you say, about different areas that you're in. Like, one thing I know about Australia, where I am, is that we have a lot of pretty much every kind of Asian food you can think of we have here, because we have those cultures in our society quite well represented, because we're just right next door to Asia. But one of the downsides of living in Australia is we have very little South American influence, because talking to my American friends and stuff who have a lot of South American influence and talk about even South American foods, like obviously Mexican food is very popular and that sort of thing. We have Mexican places here, but it's not authentic and it's not, the good stuff. And they're few and far between as well. There's one chain that I can think of and maybe another one that's Portuguese or something. But yeah, it's very, very limited. Whereas I could list you 10 Vietnamese places near my house, and then Chinese and Japanese and Thai and Malaysian, all these different types of Asian places, because we have that population here. But yeah, one of the things that I wish we had more of is more South American food, because we even have a lot of African food here too, because we've got a lot of African refugees. At least in my area, we do. So the cool thing about that is like we get really good African food. So, and I know that's a very broad term, but yeah, that's it. It always strikes me how terrible our South American representation is in Australia, because we obviously don't have many South American immigrants.
Yeah. Meanwhile, here we have all the South American food because we are in South America, but we suck at representing Asian countries because they're, even though we're like in the left side back, there's a sea between Asia and Chile. We're on the right side. We are only separated by an ocean, but it seems that it's a little bit too much because you still have to take a plane to get here. But so our Asian dishes are usually like Americanized Asian dishes. Though we have a couple of places that offer like very genuine Asian dishes that are like very good, like chef kiss, literally. But that is not what is popular. So there aren't like many places. There are like good places that are like on the cheap side though. And we actually go there for the end of the semester celebration for Tai Chi students. So that is fun.
Nice. Very cool.
But yeah, we just have South American and Americanized stuff. We don't have much else.
Well, yeah, and I think that does kind of depend on what kind of immigration you have as well, and like Australia is a very large country and very multicultural, much in a similar way to America. Like we're all immigrants except for our indigenous population, but otherwise we're all foreigners just kind of getting on, and so we end up with a very multicultural mix of different people from all around the world. But it's interesting that, yeah, like you say, there's only really one ocean between us, but for some reason South Americans didn't decide to immigrate to Australia very much. So,
maybe it's all the scary tales of the things that live there. I think that's what put them off.
maybe. But yeah, back to video games. I think, generally speaking, though, it's great to be able to learn about other cultures and other parts of the world, just as it is with anything. But I think that idea of being able to actually play a character and be in the shoes of a character that you are not familiar with is a very valuable experience, and you can learn a lot from that. But yeah, thinking of history again as well, there's another game that I played a long time ago called Wheels of Aurelia, and it's a hybrid racing / visual novel. It's mostly a visual novel where you make dialogue choices, but it's set in Italy in 1978, and it basically taught me about a period in Italian politics which I learned is called the Years of Lead or the Years of Lead. Can't remember which one, but it was basically from the late 1960s all the way through to mid 1980s. And there was, if you look at the Wikipedia page for it, if anyone's interested, it's mental, because they basically go through every year on the Wikipedia page and tell you everything that happened. And it's like Italy was just a hotbed of terrorism and revolutionary riots and bombings and assassinations, and it was a really dangerous place. And they had heaps of political upheaval during that time, and it was just a very important part of their history, as well as quite horrific. But Wheels of Aurelia is a game where you play a woman who basically hitches a ride with another woman in a nice little sports car, and you head off on a journey to go across the border into France. And your reason is that I think your character wants to have an abortion but can't do it in Italy, so is going to France to do it, which is partly commenting on the times and just general women's roles in Italy. The woman who picks you up is quite the fiery kind of feminist character who's very revolutionary and is trying to get away from Italy because of all the conservative political oppression that's happening. They have conversations along the way, and that's where the more visual novel kind of aspect comes in. And they talk about the politics and different ideas and things. And what I really liked about the game was it's not just pushing an agenda, because it kind of lets you explore different ideas and things. And every time you play the game, you can take different paths and pick up other hitchhikers who have their opinions, and they contribute to the conversation as well. And you end up having lots of different experiences along the way, to the point, I think in one version, you can end up robbing a bank along the way. In another one, you end up racing some other dude in their car. But there's all these different things. And I think I looked it up before. There's like 16 different endings to this game, which is decent. And each one of them will give you another perspective basically on that part of Italian history. And again, before playing that game, I had no idea that Italy even had this kind of stuff in their history. Like, I just was ignorant to that sort of stuff. But now, having learned about it and stuff, I feel like I've got a better appreciation of other things that come up now and then about Italy's history and things. And it just helps you understand more about the culture and why certain things might be certain ways. And yeah, it's one of those games that really does teach you a lot, and intentionally so. But it's still fun to play as well. But yeah, I think that sort of stuff is very worth learning. And just while I'm on that thought as well, I'll just add in as another example Valiant Hearts, which I'm sure a lot of us will be familiar with, because it's the World War I game where you play. It's very cartoony and 2D game, but you play through stories which are based on actual World War I letters that were written home, I think, from actual veterans. And so you play through their real life stories, and that's what guides you through the game. So the authenticity of that kind of stands out for me, and has more of an impact than, say, like playing Call of Duty or something, which might be based on real events, but at the end of the day, you're just some weirdo running around shooting everybody.
It sounds like heavy too, because
oh yeah,
of how when you send a letter, it's like you're putting part of your heart on it in a way.
Totally.
Yeah.
And yeah, some of the stories are tragic and horrific, but I think I don't mind those. I don't want to say I like, but I appreciate those sorts of stories when they are true,
Mm-hmm.
and they're just 100% something that actually happened. I get a bit annoyed if it's like fictional, because I'm like, yeah, whatever. But when it's something that's real, it's just kind of like, okay, this is worth paying attention to and learning about, because holy cow, my brain cannot conceptualize that these horrible things happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, let's go to a brighter side of things we learned before we before we finish the episode, so we don't finish on a sad note. The final thing that I think I've learned from games is like things like teamwork or socializing or communicating ideas, and that is mainly on multiplayer games.
Yes.
Warcraft 3 like really taught me to communicate ideas, even in my at the time broken English, because otherwise there was no way in hell we could make an ambush or a successful attack.
Mm-hmm.
On any base, enemy base, or Age of Empires 4, like having to from the beginning saying, hey, they have these two races, or like these two civilizations on their side. We have these two. Let's make such and such. And then trying to coordinate and attack and stuff like that. And then I have Pokemon, because I've very regrettably used to be a competitive Pokemon player for the VGC. And I met a lot of people during that era of my life because I used to go to tournaments, and being the starting point being Pokemon, and then talking about anything else, it just helped me like open up a little bit to people.
Yeah.
To the point that I ended up being the leader of the Pokemon community on my university, and I like to organize stuff and events and stuff like that.
Awesome. Yeah.
So how is it for you?
I'll even relate that back to Hell and Speak community, because one of the reasons I like being a part of the Hell and Speak community are the people that I've met and played games with. And I've, you guys from the last season of the podcast, we obviously played some games together with Monster Camp and that sort of thing. I've played some other games with Rick and Matt and Alex and other people. Recently, I've been playing, haven't been playing with, but June and I have been talking a lot about games that we've been playing at the same time. And, just that whole social aspect of, sometimes all you need when you meet someone is something in common to talk about. And then as you work your way through that, you kind of get to know each other and you make friends that way. And I feel like a lot of the people I've met and played games with through Hell and Speak on the Discord and that kind of thing, I consider them friends, and I like playing games with them, and I tend to have a good time whenever I do. So, yeah, that's definitely something that, if not learned, that I definitely get out of gaming. But I did used to play World of Warcraft back in the day, from vanilla through to the first expansion, and then I kind of stopped after that. But that was a good one for essentially, like you say, like learning to work together and coordinating what you're doing and working as a team and communicating well and that sort of thing. Because obviously, typical Warcraft stuff, you got to work together and hopefully keep everyone
Alive.
support each other in the ways that you need to.
Yeah. On that actual point, I have a friend and another that she's in another university than I, and they have a class on teamwork, and they play World of Warcraft to build up teamwork. And then after the hour, like the hour of playing World of Warcraft, then they have like some minutes to like get some feedback from their teammates and stuff like that. I just found that very funny.
Yeah, well, and it seems funny to, I think, people who play games a lot, because we go, well, yeah, of course, you need a healer who's going to heal, you need a tank who's going to tank, you need a DPS who's going to damage. That stuff makes sense to us, as in that's the team you need to build in World of Warcraft to be successful. But I would imagine to other people who perhaps aren't as familiar with games, actually experiencing that and playing that out can be quite an experience and quite educational, because you really do have to work together and you have specific roles that no one is independent of the other.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when I played Overwatch for a while as well, and I used to play with some friends, but I was like the only one who was willing to play a support role and actually be a healer. So I ended up maining Mercy for a long time. And everyone else liked that because then they didn't have to play healer. But they also really wanted to play with me because I'd play healer. and I was okay at it too. So, I managed to keep people alive. But so that was kind of nice in a way too, like being valued for what you're willing to do and what you're kind of good at as well. That's just a nice experience to have with a team, and realize that you can contribute perhaps in different ways that aren't as flashy. Like you're not the one getting all the kills and the high KD or anything like that, but you're keeping everyone alive and they all love you for it. So sometimes that's even better.
Yeah, until they notice you're not doing the thing they're supposed to do, and then they flame you for that. They roast you for that.
Until you get angry, because in Overwatch there's and different. I just, this is a bit of a tangent, but different healers will have different opinions on this. But in Overwatch, you can basically push a button that makes your character yell, "I need healing," and like highlight you on the map for any healer that's nearby. But as a healer, you can always see when someone needs healing, like a big icon pops up on the screen. Like if you're playing Mercy and one of your teammates is low on health, they basically get outlined on the screen and with a big X on it showing that this person needs healing right now. So I'm like, yeah, cool. You don't have to tell me. I can see. I'm coming to heal you. But then people just spamming that button the whole time. Like, I need healing. I need healing. It's like, okay, chill out. But, you know, that's all part of, like learning social skills and working together as a team and doing all that kind of stuff. So I think all that stuff is very valuable. And just on that as well, I have read, as you do, it was a few years ago now, but I remember reading an article basically talking about video games and how they did a study where not only did they conclude that people who played video games regularly had better hand-eye coordination and problem-solving skills, they were also much better negotiators and like team members, which at first surprised me because I'm used to being abused by like 10-year-olds when I play multiplayer. But when you think about it, it kind of makes sense. Like you've had to do way more of that than you would if you were just watching a movie or TV or something like that. You do actually have to talk to real people and work with them to achieve a goal. So I think there's a lot of value in that.
And also the higher coordination thing, like you also, I feel like if you want to play like games that are very action focused or like that put you into like they put you into a corner and it's like, okay, now get out of here. You also are able to make decisions when you are under a lot of pressure. Or like when you're in an emergency, sometimes you're more level mind, like more level calm mind in that sense.
Yeah, like you might be able to assess the situation better because you're used to doing that in games really all the time, like figuring out what the best way to go is or what the best plan of attack is. Yeah.
So do we wrap this up then?
Yeah, I think we've covered a lot of different things and areas, which, you know, from the very realistic stuff of recognizing real things in games in real life to the more perhaps esoteric philosophical idea of different cultures and different perspectives and learning about humanity in general.
In the end of the day, the things we learn are the friends that we made along the way.
I think we've all learned that at some point.
So yeah, thank you everyone to listening to this special episode of the HLTB podcast. We'll see you in another one real soon. Bye.
Adios, muchachos. That's my Spanish. If it's Spanish.
It is Spanish.
Okay, cool.